Over the past few years, home prices have skyrocketed. They've gone from an average home price in February 2019 of $290,000 to over $420,000 today. Not only is it more expensive to buy housing, but if you're a renter, renting prices are through the roof. If you are already a homeowner and you were locked into a pretty good mortgage, you still are dealing with the increase of property taxes, homeowners insurance, general maintenance on your home. When you couple all of these housing expenses with just inflation in general, groceries, utilities, gas, everything across the board is going up and it's putting more pressure on our budgets. Housing is generally the most expensive category of someone's budget. So, if you can find ways to decrease your housing expenses, then that is going to be a big weight off of your shoulders as far as your monthly budget. Wages are not going up at the same rate as inflation is. So, people are really having to figure out ways of cutting back on their expenses in order to just meet their most basic needs. Housing being the biggest category, the biggest expense, can be something that we really can think about alternative solutions to housing than what we are used to. We grew up in a world where you are taught that you are supposed to buy a house. That's like what you do as an adult. And if you don't do that, then you're not successful or you haven't financially succeeded in life. You're not a real adult until you buy a house. Well, that is becoming less and less of a reality for people. Not only are prices going up, but people are in student loan debt and just debt in general and can't afford to buy a house. They don't qualify for loans. So, what are we supposed to do? While home ownership can be a good investment, it also is risky to own a home, especially with the increase in prices. And 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, which means they don't have a month of expenses saved up. And if you don't have that month of expenses, like you can get yourself in a really bad situation really fast. So it really puts the average American in this position where we need to start thinking about alternative ways of living. And there are a lot of alternative ways of living. We just have to reframe our mindset on what successful is and what happiness is and what our future is going to look like and not get caught up in the this is what you're supposed to do. There are other ways to invest your money, there are other ways to build wealth, and buying a home in this economic environment might not be the best choice. So, let's say you're struggling financially and you're trying to find an alternative to housing. You're trying to decrease your housing cost. You just cannot pay for your current living situation, or you're trying to meet other goals. Maybe you're trying to pay off your debt, or you're trying to save money, put more money in your emergency fund. Let's talk about some of the alternative housing solutions to just buying a single family home or renting, because there are some cheaper options out there. I'm going to share with you a whole list of ideas, and some of these are going to work better for other people. There's a whole bunch of different types of people out there. Maybe you're single, maybe you're a young adult, or you're a senior, or you're a family. So I'm going to throw out a bunch of ideas, and maybe some of them will work for you and some of them won't. But we just need to start thinking creatively on alternative ways of living because everything is really expensive. You guys can also leave ideas in the comments and let's like brainstorm together and try and come up with some like cool ideas. Now, if you've been following me, you know over the past year, we have experienced a lot of different types of alternative living situations. We sold our house in Florida and moved to Tennessee, stayed in some Airbnbs. We bought a camper, renovated it, fixed it up, lived in our camper on a friend's property. Then we left and we went on a road trip out west and we're living in our rooftop tent. And then now we have moved onto our camper onto some property that we bought with the money that we sold our Florida house for. So we have experienced a lot of different types of living situations over the past year. The first idea is RV living. You can buy an RV or a camper and live in it for pretty cheaply. I would not recommend buying a newer one. Newer RVs are like really expensive, but you can find an older used RV and it's probably not very aesthetically pleasing. Fix it up and live in it. That is what we did. We bought a camper for $5,800, put about $2,000 worth of renovation work into it, and we are currently living in our camper on some property. You can either be stationary or mobile in an RV, or a combination of the two. This like gives you the ability to like travel around and experience new things. If you're trying to save a little bit of money and you do want to be traveling around, a lot of times it's a little bit cheaper to stay monthly in places. Like a lot of RV spots will give you a discount if you stay for a month, and then plus you're saving money on gas and stuff like that. So you can, rotate between being stationary, being mobile, or staying somewhere like for a month or so. Next, instead of a single family home, you can buy a mobile home. I know mobile homes get a bad rap, and that is kind of like looked down upon to live in a mobile home. But I wouldn't buy a new mobile home because they are expensive and they do depreciate so much. It's kind of just like buying a car and an RV. All of that, when you buy it new, it's going to depreciate really quickly. But if you were to buy an older mobile home that's several years old, it's already depreciated like most of the way. And you can put a little bit of, elbow grease into it, make it look cute, paint it. If you're able to save up money and pay cash and put it on a little piece of property, you can have a really affordable place to live. I was at the used bookstore the other day and I came across this book. It is called Trailer Steading, and this is what we are doing. I didn't even know that this was a thing. It's kind of like homesteading from a trailer, which is basically like a, camper or a mobile home, and living a really economical life and being more self-sufficient and self-sustainable, and growing your own food, living off the land a little bit more. And that's a way that you can really reduce your monthly expenses just in general. I'll put a link to this book down below because it was a really interesting read, and this needs to be more popular. You also might need to relocate. The cost of living varies dramatically all across the United States. Some places are very, very expensive, and other places are very, very affordable. And by considering the cost of living in different areas, you can save a whole lot of money. When we were living in Florida, the cost of living was a lot higher than it is where we are in the Appalachian Mountains. We stayed in Tennessee for a while and ended up buying property in Virginia. But these areas right here are a lot more affordable than they are in Florida. And jobs and pay are really not any different between those two areas. There are, of course, areas in the country where jobs and pay are significantly higher. But if maybe you have a job in the city, but you can move like 30 minutes to an hour outside of the city, maybe commuting is going to be worth it if you factor in the cost of living. Or even working in one state and living just over the border in a more affordable state could be a possibility. I know when we were traveling around out west, the price difference just going from Arizona to California, just crossing the border immediately, and like taxes and everything was like insane. And if I was in that area, I would probably just like live in Arizona and work in California or something like that. There's a lot of areas like that, like Oregon and Washington. Like if you consider the taxes between Oregon State and Washington State, you can just live and travel right over the border there. There are jobs available that are live-in jobs where this is probably going to work better for a single person, but where the job that you get provides housing. You could be a nanny or a caretaker to an elderly person, or you could maybe work as a park ranger or at a animal rescue. A lot of these places have housing on site. So not only are you getting paid for the job, but you also have free housing. And on kind of like this same mindset, you could also be a full-time pet sitter. I'm an animal person. I used to do pet sitting. I had a family, so I could never be like a full-time pet sitter. But a lot of people want you to stay in their homes overnight. So if you can pet sit and go and just stay in different people's homes, and you could travel, or maybe you could have a car or a van that is set up to live out of in between stays. Like van life and car camping and stuff like that is a realistic possibility. There's a lot of younger people and older people who are living in vans and in their vehicles and have everything set up. But in between doing that, you can also have jobs where you're staying places. If I was young and didn't have children during this time, I feel like that would be a very realistic option for me that I would consider doing. Over this winter, we spent 2 months doing a road trip across the Southwest, and we lived out of our truck and a rooftop tent. We stayed mostly on BLM land, which is free land out west. It's the Bureau of Land Management, and it's public land that anybody can camp on for free. Living in a rooftop tent is not really a great long-term solution for a family, but it was a great experience. And we were definitely very comfortable for the 2 months that we were out there. There is a ton of free land to go camping on. You don't have to go camping. Like, you can also have a van or an RV or a schoolie. There's all types of people out there on all this free land, and it is such a cool experience and a very, very low cost way of living. There's also this really cool organization called Woof, and it stands for Worldwide Opportunities for Organic Farms. And it is a volunteer based service where you volunteer your time and you can go stay on different farms across the world, and they pay for your housing and food, and in exchange you work for like 4 to 6 hours a day for them on their farm. This also sounds like an amazing opportunity. You do have to get there, but there are places literally all over. I went on the website just a second ago before I did this video just to see what was in my area. If, like, right now I became homeless and I didn't have anywhere to go, I could sign up, and there are like 5 or 6 places within 15 minutes of my house, 5 or 6 farms. So if you were in a desperate situation and you wanted to volunteer your time at a farm and you wanted somewhere to live and have food, then that is a great opportunity. It's set up as an educational opportunity, so you go and you learn skills also. It's not just working. You're actually like learning how to farm and how to live sustainably, and just like each farm has its own vibe and experience. But I would totally get on board with that also. The next thing you can do is just downsize. Like, I know our culture makes us think that we need a 2,500 square foot house, or, every kid needs their own bedroom. And that is just really not the reality. I mean, it is today, but you can live in a lot smaller space. My first house when I had kids was about 2,500 square feet. We downsized and went to about 1,000 square feet, and then we've downsized again, and we are in a 34-foot camper. So you really don't need a lot of space, at least not as much as you think. And downsizing not only saves on like the initial cost of the purchase price of the home or rent, but it also saves in utilities and maintenance, furnishings, like all of that stuff. It just cleaning, it saves you time in cleaning. So consider downsizing. So let's say you already own your home and things are just getting a little bit more expensive. You can rent out rooms in your home, or if you have like a mother-in-law suite, or maybe you have a piece of property, you could put like a tiny house on it, or some sort of like RV, or some sort of rental unit on it. But trying to have somebody help you pay your living expenses. Maybe you can either even have family and friends move in to live with you, and you guys can share the cost of housing. We are going to have to start being more community oriented and sharing housing costs. That is something that just a couple generations ago was very, very common and just necessary, and what everybody did. Housing is really expensive, and when you share those costs among multiple people, it is easier on everybody. Getting roommates and sharing the cost of housing among multiple people. I know that like young adults do this a lot where they will go and they almost always you have roommates when you're first starting out. Like families can do this now. Like childcare is so expensive. And if you could get into a situation with another family that you guys can work together to help each other out. So, a really cool website that I found through a realtor when we were looking at properties was a website called Furnished Finder. And it's kind of like Airbnb, but it's more geared towards like traveling nurses. So, it's a little bit more of a long term situation, a little bit more of a professional website. And if you are looking for an apartment, or a room, or if you're looking to rent out a room, you can use that website. So it's typically more of like more long-term housing. They rent it out on a monthly basis instead of like a nightly basis. So I would highly recommend checking out Furnished Finder. There's also a term going around called house hacking. And this is where when you do purchase a home, you purchase the home with the intent of it making money in some way where somebody else is going to be renting out part of that property. Or like let's say you instead of buying a house you buy a duplex where you live in one side of it and somebody else lives in the other side of it, or you buy a property with a house in a mother-in-law suite and you rent out either the house or the mother-in-law suite, so it is an income producing property. You could also buy like a bigger piece of land and section it off after you purchase it and try and make some of your money back while you get to keep the part of the property, or you section it off and you build a little tiny house or a house and you sell that off and you get your investment back. So if you are going to purchase a home, think a little bit more creatively and a little bit more than just trying to have a place to live and just building up the equity in that house. Try and think of a way to make even more money off of that situation. And then if you are going to buy a house, buy a renovation. Find something that's ugly that nobody else wants, that's just been sitting there for a while. Fix it up over the time. This is what I did with my first house. Is I bought a really ugly foreclosure. Over a 10-year period, I did a lot of renovation work to it and I lived in it while I was doing it. A move-in ready house is going to cost so much more than the ugly house that everybody walks in and is like, nope, I don't want this one. You're going to have to like be forward thinking and see the potential in a home. You obviously don't want a house that's like falling apart and the foundation's bad and it's going to need a whole lot of like foundational repair costs. The plumbing's bad, the electrical is bad. Like be careful on those things. But if it's just ugly and the carpet's stained and the walls need to be painted, it's got ugly wallpaper, like it's never been renovated, that might be a great house to buy and make it perfect for you. And along the same lines, there's another term going around. It's called a live-in flip. It's where you buy a house and you plan on selling it and you're buying it just to make money and you're living in it while you're renovating it. And you need to keep the house for at least 2 years in order to not have to pay capital gains on the home. But during that 2 years while you're working on the house, you have somewhere to live. You can resell it for a profit and then upgrade your housing situation at that time, or just keep doing that. We kind of did this with our Florida house. We didn't intend to because we plan on staying in Florida for a little bit longer than we anticipated. But we lived there for 3 years, and while we were there, we did a bunch of renovations to the house and we're able to resell it for, you know, more money than we put into it. Like I said, over the last year, my family has experienced a lot of different housing situations, and we currently have gotten our housing expenses down to $0 a month. We are living off grid on some property that we bought in our camper, and we don't have any housing expenses at all. We paid cash for the camper, we renovated it. We don't have any utilities because we're living off grid. That doesn't mean we're going to live this way all the time. We plan on building a home on our property. We plan on, getting water, getting solar, or hooking up to the grid, having electricity. But for now, it's safe to say that we can very easily live off of nothing for our housing expense. It's nice to know that, like, if anything happens in the future and we are not able to pay for housing, we are able to live off grid where we have a safe and secure place to be, and we can do that. We are set up, we are prepared to do that. It is possible to live well and avoid all of those housing expenses, or at least a lot of them. You just have to get out of the mindset that we have been raised in, and the mindset that you have to buy a house and own a house and have all these big things. Just know that if you are struggling with housing costs, if you are having a really hard time like paying your bills and keeping up with everything, it is because the reality is things are getting really, really hard for most of us, and you are not alone. Collectively, we have to come up with a better way of living sustainably in the economy today. And starting with housing, our biggest expense, can be a great way to improve our lives. As always, thank you guys so much for watching.